Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at Darmok, Jalad, and AI, decoding the Memelex. Let's dive right into this absolutely fascinating breakdown of how a classic 1990s sci-fi concept actually flawlessly explains modern internet culture and artificial intelligence. Seriously, if you've ever wondered how the way we speak online is fundamentally rewiring how language itself works, you are in the exact right place. So, the core mystery we're tackling today is this. In that famous Star Trek The Next Generation episode, humanity makes first contact with an alien species called the Tamarians. The ship's highly advanced universal translator kicks in, and it decodes their vocabulary perfectly. But here's the catch. Why does this perfect dictionary tech completely fail to actually translate the Tamarian language? To the human crew, what they're hearing is just absolute, pure, semantic gibberish.
Let's start with Section 1, the Universal Translator's Failure. To really figure this out, we have to look closely at where the communication actually breaks down, which is entirely at the cultural level.
When the humans hear the iconic phrase Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, the translator provides the exact literal words, but it comes out as total semantic gibberish. Why? Because the atomic unit of their language isn't a word at all. It's an entire story. Saying Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra is meant to signify cooperation, and that meaning is derived entirely from a deep-seated cultural myth about two strangers bonding. The machine translates the words, sure, but it completely misses the story. And this brilliantly illustrates the glaring blind spot of the sci-fi tech. It's treating language as just modular, literal building blocks, almost like Legos. But the aliens actually communicate entirely through dense narrative metaphors signifying massive concepts, like cooperation or catastrophic failure. If you don't know the story, those building blocks mean absolutely nothing. Moving on to Section 2, unpacking the Memelex. Let's look at the underlying science here and see how this builds into actual linguistic theory. Because, believe it or not, this isn't just some clever sci-fi writer's trick. It's heavily grounded in evolutionary biology. In the show, the Tamarians say "shaka" when the walls fell to convey a massive failure. Think about how that is exactly like saying Juliet on her balcony to someone who has literally never heard of William Shakespeare. The literal words balcony and Juliet are totally useless without the underlying cultural story. I mean, you can know what a balcony is, but you won't understand the romance, the tragedy, or any of the context. So, the crucial point here is that the famous evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins actually gave this exact phenomenon a name. Tamarian operates as a perfect, closed-loop memelex. A meme, in this scientific sense, is just a unit of cultural transmission. And in a memelex, the literal words are just empty vessels. They only have power, they only have meaning when they're filled by the shared cultural memory of the people speaking them. Which brings us to Section 3. We are the Tamarians. Because as alien as this concept sounds on paper, it's actually exactly how we communicate right now in our own daily lives. We literally do this all the time without even realizing it. For example, take the traditional Chinese chengyu, which is a four-character idiom. You could have an absurd literal translation about a snake drawing contest, but to native speakers, it perfectly communicates a highly complex idea. It references an ancient parable about an arrogant man who finished drawing a snake so fast that he added feet to it and was instantly disqualified because, well, a snake with feet isn't a snake. To a native speaker, the meaning exists entirely within that narrative, instantly signaling that someone is ruining a product by over-engineering it. And you know, this translates directly into our digital culture as well. Think about when a specific cohort of gamers types failfish into a Twitch chat stream. To a total outsider, it's just an image of a guy facepalming. But when you compare it with Tamarian, it serves as the exact equivalent dense memetic marker, replacing literal syntax. An outsider reading a Twitch chat will see the emote, but completely miss the actual communication happening. It's essentially our modern-day shaka when the walls fell. Okay. Let's jump to Section 4, the Plausibility Paradox. This outsider experience brings us to a major linguistic hurdle that challenges how a society could actually function this way in reality. Linguists call this the Plausibility Paradox. You really have to ask, how do mechanics receive highly technical instructions? Or how do infants even learn the language without starting with literal building blocks? You can't exactly tell an engineer to go fix a starship's incredibly complex warp core by casually citing a poem about a river, right? Well, the leading theory to solve this paradox is this really elegant two-step dual-layer language system. In step one, literal words act as the base, kind of like training wheels used exclusively to teach children. Then, in step two, once those cultural myths are fully internalized by the adult, those literal definitions get entirely discarded in favor of high-speed, insanely information-dense formal mimetic shorthand. And for those mechanics fixing the warp core, they likely rely on historical eponyms. That means naming units of measurement after people, which is exactly what human science do. We measure frequency in hertz or pressure in pascals. So a Tamarian engineer might say something like 130 of Watt's mules to express power consumption. It keeps things highly technical and precise, but it's still deeply rooted in cultural myth. This leads us to Section 5, How AI Beat Sci-Fi. This is where we get to the most incredible modern breakthrough, actually solving the sci-fi dilemma using today's artificial intelligence. Researchers actually tested this Memelex hurdle by fine-tuning an AI model specifically on Tamarian expressions. They used what's called a T5 model. The real key here is that a T5 model is built from the ground up to understand context, rather than just swapping out isolated words like a traditional dictionary or, say, a sci-fi universal translator. Amazingly, they fed it these complex expressions, and the AI successfully translated the metaphor-heavy language with a stunning level of accuracy, 76%. That is absolutely wild. An AI sitting in a lab today succeeded where the legendary sci-fi universal translator failed. And the core reason for this incredible triumph is that the sci-fi translator was deterministic. It relied on rigid rules and isolated dictionary definitions. But modern AI is probabilistic. It relies on massive pattern matching. The AI didn't need to actually live in the alien culture. It just read millions and millions of human stories to contextually predict that a phrase about walls falling maps directly to a disaster. So, what you should really take away from this explainer is that meaning fundamentally comes from our shared context. It proves that literal words are just the scaffolding of connection. Dictionaries only get you so far. True comprehension requires internalizing shared stories, because real, authentic communication happens in the shared space between us. As our digital slang and image-based memes compress complex ideas into tighter and tighter shorthand every single day, it leaves us with this final, genuinely baffling question for future historians who might try to decode our internet culture without its original context. Are we actively evolving into a Tamarian society? Shaka, when the walls fell? Indeed. Thanks so much for learning with me today. Keep looking closely at the subtext of your own daily conversations, and I'll see you on the next explainer.